Okay, so imagine this. You're living on land that's flourishing with food and other needs. You have a home that's safe and perfectly built, and you have a family standing with you. But then something happens. Your home is taken from you. The foods and necessities of your life are gone as well. Then you lose your family. But there's more. You are not allowed to wear the clothes you like, eat the foods you're used to, and can't keep your beliefs or religions that you used to have. What will you do? Many white Americans wanted to move for various reasons, such as finding gold, usually using that to get rich, and many other factors. Because whites were more powerful, they were able to push themselves to the lands they wanted while pushing Native Americans farther away, sending them to reservation homes, killing all their buffalo, and etc. But Native Americans did not go down without a fight. Chief Red Cloud ambushed U.S. troops, killing all the men. Another example was June of 1867, when Colonel George Custer rushed ahead of the columns from the U.S. cavalry. A Native American named Crazy Horse led the charge and killed Custer and all 250 of his men. Indian tribes were no longer recognized as independent nations to make treaties with. The reservation system was replaced. Each Indian family was given 160 acres of farmland, but the land was not big enough to farm because of the climate. To further assimilation, missionaries and other reformers established boarding schools for Indian children. Indian children were to learn to live the rules and cultures of white America. The struggle to retain their homeland, freedom, and culture proved tragic. Native Americans faced poverty and alcoholism in coping with their new way of life. Needing workers, railroad companies like the Central Pacific Railroad recruited people from China and immigrants from Ireland. They worked under harsh conditions with very little safety. From the 1850s on, the West was the most diverse part of the nation. It was home to more than 80% of the nation's Asian, Mexican, American, and Native American residents. The 15th Amendment became part of the United States Constitution in 1870. State governments could not prevent someone from voting because of race, color, or previous servitude. Southern states enacted Jim Crow laws through loopholes in the 15th Amendment. Jim Crow laws sought to prevent African Americans from voting and to segregate the races. They enacted a poll tax which required voters to pay a tax to vote. The tax, which began in Georgia, cost voters $1 to $2 to vote. Poor African Americans could scarcely afford such a fee. The states also required voters to pass a literacy test, an understanding test. Because many African Americans were denied an education, it was extremely difficult to pass these tests. African Americans opposed injustices. Booker T. Washington was a leading voice for African Americans during this time. Washington believed that African Americans should focus on being hardworking and be independent economically rather than fight for political equality. He also established the Tuskegee Institute, providing industrial or vocational education. W.E.B. Du Bois graduated from Harvard University, earning a Ph.D. He opposed Washington's position and thought African Americans should demand full and immediate equality, exactly the same as the whites. Ida Wells, a schoolteacher, bought a newspaper and called it free speech. She protested against lynching, and Wells toured Europe and helped organize women's clubs to fight for African American rights. In 1879, California law prohibited cities from employing people who were Chinese. Several years later, San Francisco established segregated Oriental schools. Mobs attacked Chinese workers, saying that they had taken white jobs. In 1882, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act that banned Chinese workers from entering the U.S. This law was repealed in 1943. Before the Civil War, women were prominent in reform movements, including abolition. Women began to fight for the right to vote, own property, and the right for an education. In 1869, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton formed the National Women's Suffrage Association to fight for a constitutional amendment that would grant women the right to vote. These women made speeches around the country to gain support for the right of women to vote. Anthony voted in an 1872 presidential election legally. Anthony was arrested. She ended up being fined $100 she never paid. When Anthony died, women still did not have the right to vote. It wasn't until 1920, 14 years after her death, that the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was passed, giving all adult women the right to vote. The number of women attending college increased. By 1900, one-third of all college students nationwide were women. An era of political corruption. Many government officials accepted bribes. Most presidents were weak in their authority. Government jobs were given by the spoil system. Spoil system was where politicians gave jobs on the basis of party loyalty rather than qualified workers. The Populist Party formed in reaction to government corruption. The party was a grassroots movement of common people. They ran candidates in local, state, and national elections. In 1892, the Democratic Party elected William Jennings Bryan as their presidential candidate. Bryan held to populist ideals. He wanted the coining of silver. Bryan spoke for the people and farms of the country. Workers in the cities did not support free silver. Populism failed to win a state outside of the South and West. Supporting Bryan led to the Populist Party to disappear.